Today I'd like to share some information with you about deer feeders that we use on our farm to supplement feed our deer. We've tried to supplement deer food, especially in the months when there's very little for them to eat, and we initially had a lot of problems with bears. The feeders that we used would be basically broken, tore apart, and I'll actually take you with us and show you a feeder that one of the feeders that was destroyed, and how we have overcome those issues. I'd like to share with you some basics of what you need to set up one of your own feeders in the woods. One of the first things that I'll point out, that these feeders are set up in the woods where there's trees and cover, so that the deer can visit them basically during the daytime if they wish, where there's quite a bit of cover for them. First thing you're going to need is some cabling, fairly high strength. I like to have something that will hold about 300 to 400 pounds minimum, aircraft grade. We use solar panels, and one of the best solar panels, obviously I'll show you, has this wire enclosed by metal conduit. Obviously you're going to need a feeder, and we use the programmable feeder. Years ago we used to use just the solar feeders that would throw in the morning and the afternoon, but these are nice because they can be set up to go off whenever you want to. I might get back to that in just a second. Something you might think about, you're going to need a piece of tin or some other kind of material to put a roof of some sort over your feeder. And lastly, you'll actually need a barrel to hold the corn. This particular barrel will hold about 90 pounds of corn. Depending on the barrel you've got, you're going to have to design a way to suspend it using the cable. You're going to have to drill a hole in the bottom and find some method to attach it, and that will depend on what other hardware you buy. How long will it last? Obviously that depends on your feeder, the programmable part of it, how long, how many seconds you have it go off, and how many times you have it go off a day. Typically we get about 2.5 to 3 weeks out of one filling of corn. One thing to think about is that we've been using feeders probably for 15 years now, and basically mature bucks do not visit these feeders. Very rarely do you see a mature buck come into this type of feeder. Now, not saying that they don't come in, but they're not going to come in very often, especially when there's any hunting pressure at all. The does, the young bucks, they'll all visit, but mature bucks, about the only time you're going to see them around these feeders is during the rut, when they're physically chasing. So you might ask, if you're using this primarily to hunt with, then, and your large bucks aren't visiting them, then why do you use them? Well, two reasons. One, we still want to be able to have a healthy deer herd, and part of having a healthy deer herd is so they're, especially your doe, are having a stable food supply. And two, during the rut, the mature bucks will be found where the doe are at. I personally don't put feeders really close with my tree stands, but they'll be on travel routes going to those feeders, and that's a good hunting strategy. All right, that's enough of this. Let's load up, and I'll show you some other materials after I get them in the side by side, and we'll go visit a couple of sites where we have these feeders on our farm. One last thing you've got to have. just take time and show you what I'll bring out with me when I'm working on the feeders. First off, it's corn, obviously. I like to bring a spare battery in case the batteries in the feeder have gone dead for some reason. I always bring a funnel. Some of our barrels will need funnels for, and some of them we don't. They'll have tops. Bring a bucket that helps to put the corn in the feeders. And I like to bring a multimeter so I can check the condition of the batteries. Alright, I want to show you our setup here. First of all, you probably saw, got a boat crank, and we put that on there with a piece of angle iron on the tree. The feeder itself is a barrel, and this is got the lid that comes all the way open, and of course we've got a timed feeder here at the bottom. Also included, we always put on a solar charger on these feeders so that we don't have to constantly change batteries in and out. And the last thing that we do is we get them really high in the tree. This is probably 18 to 20 feet up in the tree with a pulley, and the pulley comes back down here. I'll show you something about this corn. If you get corn and it's dirty, in other words it's got a lot of stalks and stobs, you'll not have good service. They'll get stopped up in the feeder mechanism, and then they'll fail to throw corn. So you need to make sure your corn is clean. Now if I'd have pulled the lid off that barrel, obviously, and there was corn still in it, then I would check the battery and start troubleshooting. Normally, with these solar chargers, we don't have to change batteries. I'll show you one thing that's probably really important. You need at the top of your barrel some protection. If not, then the squirrels will get up on top of these barrels and they'll chew right through them, especially the plastic ones. If you get water in these motors on these feeders, they will not last very long. Some of our feeders have lasted 8 or 10 years, but we did not have that kind of luck out of them when we didn't have roofs on them to keep the water out. Let me show you one other thing, maybe a couple things. Your solar charger, obviously you want to make sure your solar chargers are facing south. The sun's right here, and when we wind this up, it catches on a cable up there, so it'll always face south. So you need to make sure that when you build this feeder that you have some way of making it point in the right direction. And also, even though you've got the cable up there, raccoons and squirrels are still going to get on this and try to chew if you can. These we found work really well. They've got a steel enclosure over the cable, the wiring, and they just do, you'll have less problems with the squirrels and raccoons tearing those up. Here are the feeders we tried for the first few years, and they hold a lot of corn, 55-gallon barrels. But if you look at this, this is a very strong piece of pipe, but they're no match for bears. And we had problem after problem with the bears tearing the hardware loose. As you can see, we actually had one bear turn it over and drug the entire barrel full of corn through the woods, between the trees, over probably 150 yards. It took us 2 weeks to figure out what had happened to it, but that was when we decided that we'll have to change things up and go with the elevated feeders. Let me show you one other thing. Obviously in bear country, you almost have to have boxes, metal boxes for your cameras. This feeder's got a little bit of a different setup. Instead of running a cable up and having a different cable at the top, I just ran one cable across, made a loop on that tree over there, and the entire cable comes up and down. So there's a pulley right there. I think it has less effect on the trees because there's basically loops around those trees so they don't get girdled quite as bad. Alright, on this feeder here, the barrel you can see just got a small hole in it, and put the hardware on it there, and that's what I got this device here for. I bought this at Tractor Supply. Makes your life a whole lot easier filling it up with corn. Alright, I wanted to show you this feeder. This feeder still has corn in it, and it should not have. So I'm going to change the battery out in it, and I'm also going to oil this. I have a feeling this feels a little bit tight, so it may have just seized up there. But definitely I'm going to change the battery in it and then test it a few times. Okay, I've worked on this feeder and got a battery in it. I've also lubricated the motor, the housing around the motor, and I've got to test it to see if it's going to go off. So we'll see here in just a second. All right, Bailey, you ready to go home? Let's go home. Come on. Good girl. Say bye-bye.